Food for Therapy podcast, the show that combines my training and specialties of psychotherapy and counseling and writing with my love and passion of food and hosting and culture. And I'm really excited today because we've got a wonderful, wonderful young man, Duane Morgan, pro athlete, on the show, and we're talking about men's health and mental health. So tune in. We're enjoying a beautiful homemade chicken burger, and all the recipes will be on our socials. Duane, welcome to my table.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I've got so much to ask you. So let's just go into your history of playing pro ball. So you went to Adelphi University.
Yes.
When did you start playing pro ball?
So I graduated from Adelphi in 2015.
Right.
And then, so I graduated in the May, and I signed my first contract actually on my birthday, July 24th.
Right.
Of that same summer.
Yep.
And that was to my first professional team, which was in Argentina.
Mm-hmm.
And so I played in Argentina for like 2 months. I was playing really well. And then I got injured. So I was only a pro for 2 months, lived the pro life for 2 months, and then adversity hit right away. I ended up coming home and getting surgery on my ankle.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took the rest of that year off, obviously, recovering from the injury. And then the next season, I ended up signing in Europe and been in Europe ever since.
All right, so let's just go back a little bit. I want to hear about your getting injured. How do you think that impacted your mental health?
Well, you know, it's funny because at the time that it happened, I was 22, almost turning 23, and I didn't know anything about mental health. I didn't know anything about like depression and stuff like that. And but I was finding it hard to get through those times, like, because I didn't know what the future was going to hold, if I was going to have a career or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
In hindsight, like looking back at it, I was in a depression. You know, I actually was depressed on my road to recovery because I was working so hard. I wasn't seeing the results right away. And like I said, there was uncertainty about the future. So looking back on it now, like it was a tough time for me to get through, you know?
So what now, when you look back with hindsight, what was the indicator that made you believe you were depressed?
Yeah, so I was in a cast and I was in my room pretty much 24/7, and I had no motivation to leave the house.
Right.
You know what I mean? And specifically when I was in the cast, because I couldn't move, but like even just walking around the house, like there was no motivation to do anything, you know, because I felt like everything was just, my world was just coming down.
Right.
And so it's just like lack of motivation to just get up every day and do the everyday things. It just wasn't there. I just wanted to stay in the room, light off. It'd be like broad daylight, put the shades down, light off, just watch a Netflix show and just just be in my own world.
Right.
And so like I said, at the time I didn't know what I was going through. I knew it was different for me, but also that was like the first time that I wasn't playing. So I just thought like, all right, this is just what happens when you don't play, like you know. But it was just a dark time, you know, in hindsight.
So when you say you didn't know about mental health at the time, do you think the fact that you didn't have a definition of what you were experiencing meant that you couldn't truly identify with your experience?
Possibly. Yes, possibly. Like I said, like growing up, that wasn't something that I felt like I had the right to be feeling. Like I didn't have the right to be depressed or complaining or anything like that. So, and just, you know, through, I guess, how I was raised or like the circumstances or the society that I was in. I didn't really completely understand what it was. And I definitely didn't think that I could be the one having those issues or those
vulnerabilities.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's a really interesting thing, because oftentimes what I do hear from men is that because men really struggle with that emotional language, and not having a clear definition of what you're experiencing will then again even compound the experience for you and isolate you.
Right.
Because if you don't, if you're having an experience and you know that it's foreign to you, but you're not sure what it is, you kind of think, I just got to pick my bootstraps up and keep going.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
But how do you think your sporting culture impacts mental health for men?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that.
Please enjoy your burgers.
Oh yeah. I don't want to get cold.
Yes, please. Yes.
Yeah,
Because
I mean,
I know that, you know, in Australia, and I was speaking about this to my husband, in Australia, I think that they've made quite a gallant effort to destigmatize mental illness for men.
right.
It's not kind of a direct campaign, but it's done indirectly. And I'll give you an example. Please eat.
Yeah.
We were talking about the AFL, so you know the football in Australia, and
Yes.
my husband was telling me that specifically in Australia, they've now started including female commentators on the program AFL. They have for every male AFL team, they have a corresponding female one. But they also have psychologists that sit on the bench with the players during the games, which I thought was fascinating because as a man, men really are conditioned through patriarchy. And patriarchy is not only incredibly pervasive for women, it affects and impacts men too. I thought it was a really clever way to tackle men's mental health by having a psychologist sitting there on a bench when you're playing. It's that very indirect way of having a conversation about how are you doing, how are you feeling, what's going on. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah, and I mean in the sporting industry, especially in the basketball industry. So like I said, I turned pro in 2015, and now when you sign a contract to go overseas, because I'm like I mentioned, European basketball player, so I'm not sure about the other markets, but in the European contracts now, they put clauses that says you can take mental health days.
Wow.
So now, for perspective, in 2015, there was none of that.
There was none of that.
That wasn't even a thought. Like nobody even thought that you would even need a mental health day as an athlete.
Right.
You know, so I think over the last 5-6 years, they've been taking these strides, like how you just mentioned about the AFL team. They've been taking these strides to emphasize mental health and, you know, giving people an outlet to somebody to speak to, whether it's on staff or they'll like refer you out. I see that a lot of times in my clubs that I played with. You know, they'll have somebody that they'll refer you to. Like, okay, you know, if your play is like not up to par, they'll take you to the side, and like the GM will come down to you and take you to the side and say, do you need to speak to somebody? What's going on?
Because everything impacts, right?
Right.
We are all human. We all have vulnerabilities. We all bleed. We all cry. Mental health and mental illness and mental conditions and mental disorders are part of the human condition, you know. And I mean, look, I grew up in a home, as I've mentioned to you, with domestic violence, and my father had psychiatric illness, and it was very, very shameful at that time to be talking about it openly. There was, in our culture, in the Egyptian culture, patriarchy is so pervasive, and it's so gender specific. So if you're a man, you shouldn't cry, you shouldn't complain about your mental health and anguish. And so growing up in that kind of environment, one, gave me the experience to understand that we all have challenges, but it also highlighted for me how destructive patriarchy has been for men as well. And that's probably going to take a long time, because I still feel that men really struggle to say, I'm not okay, I'm not coping. Tell me a little bit about your experience in college and what was the system around college sports and how mental illness or mental illness days played into that, or did it? What was your experience?
Yeah, so like when I went to college, it sounds so long ago now, but that was like 2011. So, high school. When I went to high school, it was 2011. And that was around the time where like all the high school coaches were trying to mirror what the college coaches were trying to do.
Right.
And the coaches had this stigma of like being the macho man and, you know, the men amongst men. I'm the leader. You guys get behind me. If I say run, you say how fast. If I say jump, like, you know, it's like just trying to prove how macho they are.
Right.
And so you kind of get conditioned in high school to look at your coach, and he's the one that's building the culture of the team.
And so it's like that trickles down to the players, I feel like. So now where the players are trying to show their macho to each other. And like in basketball, there's like a big thing about being the alpha, and like you get rewarded for being the alpha in the room.
Right.
So a lot of guys are like trying to go outside themselves. They could be the nicest guy in the world if you talk to them in another setting, but when you get in the locker room, they want to, puff their chest out a little bit more.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that going on, but I really think that it was kind of like trickled down from how the coaches were.
Oh, definitely.
Because then when I go to college, the first day of college practice, I remember my coach, like, he threw me out the practice. He was like, I was stuck in like this drill where it's like a one-on-one drill, me versus like 6 other guys, and like I was on defense, and I had to play defense against 6 guys consecutively. And so obviously after the 6th guy, I'm like dead tired. So I put my hands on my legs for a rest, like just bent over. He's like, Duane, get the F out. Get out. You're soft. Get out. Oh, so he kicks me out. So now I'm in the locker room, like just down on myself, and he's like, he comes in, but like he was like really adamant and like really animated, but like showing his dominance over me, like, get out, just, puffing his chest out.
And how old are you?
19 at the time. No, sorry, 18. I'm 18. I'm 18, freshly turned 18.
You're still a kid.
So now I'm in the locker room, and I'm waiting. I'm just down, just like wondering. I don't even know who's going to come in, but I know somebody's going to come in and address me.
Right.
The coach comes in, and he's like a teddy bear. He's like, he puts his hand over me. He's like, man, I didn't want to do that, but I had this. And he literally told me, like, I have to do that to show everybody else that I'm the man. And I'm like, bro, you're a teddy bear. And like, in reality, that's who his real personality is. He's the nicest guy in the world. Right. But he puts on the face, like you say. He wants the image of pulling your bootstraps up and trying to show everybody, like, this is how a man is supposed to be.
What a burden.
Yeah.
But how did you process all that? That's a lot of conflicting messages.
Yeah.
It's a lot of, well, who do you want me to be?
Right.
Right? Like, like it's a lot of conflict for men.
Yeah.
Like, how do you process something like that?
Yeah, and it's like, really, everybody's different. The way I took it was, because the way I look at all of my coaches, and I just looked at them like another human. I didn't look at them like a father figure, because I have a strong male father figure in my life. Yeah. My dad is, that's who I look to if I want to say like how I want to be.
Yeah.
So I never looked at any of my coaches like that. But you have some people that are some players that look at their coach like a father figure, where it's like they don't have it. So it's like, I want to be like him. So those people, they're more susceptible to trying to just reenact what they see them doing and try to do it in the locker room. And I don't know. Yeah, it can be very conflicting.
Burden for men. It is. And I'll speak to the example of my brother, because my brother, obviously growing up in an Egyptian home, was told over and over by my father, boys don't cry, boys don't cry. And I don't ever recall seeing him cry. Even when my mum died, I know how devastated he was, because he lived his whole life being devastated by my mum's death. But I don't ever recall seeing him cry. He did associate tears with weakness. 100%. But the problem is, you see, this is the challenge that I try to explain to people. Where do those emotions go? If you can't express them, if you can't allow the flow of sadness or the flow of some kind of depression, or depression happens because you're not expressing, all right? It happens when you try and contain and compound and push down, right? Whatever is not expressed then becomes a dis-ease in your body. And as it would happen, my brother was incredibly close with my mother, as we all were, but because he was not afforded by our culture the ability to express emotion and show emotion, and he contained it, and it became symptomatic, and he ended up dying of a broken heart, which is broken heart syndrome, right? Yes. That is an actual thing. I mean, if you look at Harvard Medical Journal, broken heart syndrome is associated with sadness and grief.
Yes.
And it's an incredible insight into what we don't express, we repress, then takes place physiologically in our bodies, and our bodies cannot contain that.
Yes.
We're not machines. We're made to express and release. The sadness that comes up for someone has to be processed first,
Yep.
then released.
Yeah.
You know, and if you're not in an environment that is conducive to harmony and allows you to do that, you will get depressed.
Yeah.
You will get sad.
I agree.
You will not be able to cope.
Yeah.
You know,
I think that's like the interesting thing about athletes, and when it comes to like mental health and stuff, we're so programmed to like relieve our stress through physical activity.
right?
So like we find a way to get temporary release to whatever we're feeling.
Right.
Like if I have a bad day, something happens in my house, and then I go and play basketball, I feel better after.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
I think a lot of athletes are tricked to think that, okay, just because you feel better after you just played today, that doesn't mean that tomorrow it's
I
not
like
just going to
that
come
word that
back
you
up.
used. You're tricked. You're tricking yourself into thinking that you're healed, but you actually haven't.
Right.
Because whatever doesn't have a language for it then becomes repressed in the body.
Yeah.
And like I said, we're not machines. We're not made to contain all that. We have
Right.
to allow it to move through us and release it.
Yes.
So we spoke about, is there anything else you want to talk to me about in terms of your sporting culture? Because I wanted to kind of break it into sporting and then your heritage, your background, and then into pop culture as well.
Okay.
Is there anything else about sporting? Because sporting is a big one. I mean, in all countries, there's sports.
Yes.
And the culture can be incredibly, informative to people that are playing sports in terms of what are the appropriate behaviours. So what else can you tell me about sports that you learned that you realise could be detrimental to mental health?
Well, aside from what I was just talking about, like us feeling better after we play or after physical exercise, I think that I do want to give them some credit now, because I think it's getting a little bit better now, because now you'll see professional athletes, famous athletes, they're writing books, they're talking about it. There's like a small improvement. Yeah, and also a small group for people that are like voicing their hurt or their pain or their struggle.
I can think of one. He's an American swimmer, I believe. He just won umpteen gold medals. I believe, I can't remember his name. I don't recall his name. I think he's one of them. There are elite athletes that talk about it. Can you give me an example of one?
So there was 2 basketball players that were writing, like, so I'm not sure if you heard of the Players Tribune, but it's like a platform where professional athletes can write their own stories or about anything that they've been through.
Oh, right.
And so 2 athletes wrote on this platform.
What is the platform through? Through European basketball? Or
No,
NBA?
NBA.
Right.
Yeah, mainly NBA and NFL athletes.
Right.
But yeah, there's Kevin Love is one. He was a teammate of LeBron James when they were in Miami, and he slipped into, I believe he slipped into I don't want to misspeak on his struggles, but I believe it was a depression. That he slipped into some type of depression after like he had to change roles in the NBA. So he went from being a star to like being like the 3rd or 4th man. And so he said like it was like extremely hard, and like, he struggled with his identity, confidence.
That's very common actually for athletes.
Right, but nobody says it, because as an athlete, especially basketball players, you're supposed to be confidence is supposed to be sky high. But as an actual basketball player, I know a lot of players struggle with the confidence on the day-to-day level. You know what I mean?
Does.
Like in basketball, a lot of players' identity is so tied in with what we do.
Correct.
So if we have a bad day on the court,
it reflects.
It will reflect, and we'll bring it home. Right. We'll have a bad day. So, sometimes it happened to me, and I had to snap myself out of that, because I was seeing, like, it was one season where I had, as a pro, I think it was my first year in France, and I was just like up and down with my performance.
Right.
One game I have 20, the next game I have 5, next game I have 15, then the next game I have 2, and it was just so up and down, inconsistent. And like I became inconsistent as a person. Like I felt like my emotional being so inconsistent. After the 20-point game, I'll be the happiest guy in the world, and then I'll have 2 points, and I'm like quiet in social settings. And
what was happening? Can you speak to that?
Yeah,
what was happening for you at that time?
I think it was just like my confidence was just so tied into what I'd done because I've been so used to excelling in basketball. Everywhere I went, I've been so used to being like put on some kind of pedestal or something like that. And I got too wrapped up in that.
Right.
And I realized that like a lot of my personal feelings and personal connection identity was wrapped up in the performance. And like that's the worst thing you can do as an athlete because you can't control your performance at the end of the day.
Absolutely. So, and it's interesting that you say that because I often talk to people about this in the context of ego. Anything that is attached to the ego is not going to be to your benefit for health and mental health because the ego is designed for competition.
Right.
The ego is designed for hierarchy.
Right.
The ego is designed for good and bad. The ego is designed for surviving.
Yes.
You see? And if you've identified yourself as an athlete or a professional athlete solely as that, then you will struggle tremendously.
Yes.
And the ego is also identified with arrogance. And so what most people confuse oftentimes is confidence with arrogance. Confidence is silent but strong, right? Arrogance is abrasive and loud and brash. You see the difference?
Yes.
And this also feeds into a lot of professionals, period, but a lot of professional athletes will become identified with that kind of, you know, hierarchical competition kind of, you know, mentality. And this,
and also the well, sorry to cut you off, but what I saw a lot in my experiences with people, like they will get it tied up into the praise as well.
Exactly.
So when the fans are reacting like beautifully to you, they feel like they're your friends. Like, oh, they love me. These are my people.
Yes.
And then when you have a bad performance and they crap on you, it's like, oh, everybody hates me now. Like, and I've seen too many people get wrapped up in that.
Because you're attached to it. And this is what I explain to people when they're talking about ego is that anything that you attach to, right? So you have to see success in the same way that you see a non-successful experience. And I don't even like to use success. I say everything is an experience. And if you feel wonderful when you get appraised and glorified and, you know, like they see you like the Messiah, then you are going to fall when they don't see you that way. There's a Buddhist and Hindu philosophy around non-attachment, not to attach to the ego, see everything as just transient and you're moving through it and passing through it. And it's a great philosophy for life. But in sports, I know for a fact that a lot of sports people do suffer tremendously once their career has stopped, once they've changed a role in that career, because they are solely identified with that aspect of themselves.
Right.
So that's really interesting. I want to hear about your culture now and how you think culture informs your mental health and wellness, because that's a big one. Because we have sports culture, we have, you know, scholastic culture, we have our home culture, and then we have a broader pop culture, like the world we live in, right?
Yes.
Tell me about your heritage and how you think that informs your mental health and well-being. So you're Jamaican.
Yes, so I'm Jamaican. My mom, my dad, born and raised in Jamaica. They ended up coming to America in their late teens, early 20s, and they both met in America. So I look at it as like Jamaican, American, but more so Jamaican, because when I go home where I'm comfortable is a Jamaican heritage completely. Just when I leave the house is okay, I'm taking in the American culture.
Right.
So, but the Jamaican culture is like similar to your Egyptian culture. I've never seen my dad cry.
Patriarchal.
I've never seen him cry. In our adult lives, I've never seen my brother cry. They've never seen me cry. Like that's just I don't cry.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, Duane. It's a release. Crying is a release.
Yeah.
A relief.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. So what do you do with that emotion?
To be honest, it's like
you've buried it.
Yeah, you kind of bury it. You kind of bury it. Now, okay. One thing I will say is there was a time where emotions came to, like, you know, they overcame me, and I was just thinking about a lot of things.
What was that time? How old were you?
I want to say 20.
Right.
19, 20. And I was just sitting down. I was like by myself on the couch, and I was thinking. I had a friend that passed. I had two friends that passed, and then I was just thinking about a lot of situations, and overcame me with. I just started crying. Waterworks, just started crying out of nowhere.
So you did cry.
And I did cry.
What an
I did cry.
amazing release
Yeah.
for you.
And I did feel better after. I was like, wow,
Of course you do.
yeah, this is good.
Of course you do. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so in the Jamaican culture, it's like, you're not going to see your elders cry. You're not going to see them show vulnerability. You know, and then
that's an important thing that you say there. So crying is showing vulnerability. The association with showing emotion, right, is seen as a weakness.
Yes.
Right? And we need to reframe that.
Yes.
It's a strength to show emotion.
I agree.
It's a strength, right? It shows the complexity of being human. To cry, to get angry, to get sad, it has to go somewhere.
Yes.
You know. And you said when you cried over your friend's passing, you felt a tremendous release.
I did.
Yeah.
Yes, I did. Yeah, and you know, I want to give my family credit too, because you know, we've come a long way as you know, as a unit when it comes to I don't want to say shaking, but kind of like moving past some of the old toxic ideals that our culture may bring.
So give me an example.
So for an example, I don't want to give you anything too harsh. Anybody that knows Jamaicans, you know, we have some very strong opinions. But for example, it's like, you know, the vulnerability part is like, now me and my dad, we're at a place where he tells me he loves me. You know, we say it now. We grew up. We didn't really say that.
That's so lovely.
So, but now we're at the place where he can tell me, "I'm proud of you, son, and I love you."
Oh, I love that.
And yeah, my stepmom always makes fun of, you know, him and me because we don't really talk like that. So when it does happen, she's like, "Oh, you guys are so cute." So it's like, you know, we're moving forward and like kind of breaking out of that mold.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah,
it is a very important thing. Any child, and I still see myself in the context of being a child because I am my father's child, the hearing your parents say to you, "I'm proud of you," is validating, you know. And I explain this to my husband all the time because he grew up in a really, probably 1% of the world, a beautiful, idyllic childhood, which he's fortunate to have. And he felt very validated. And, you know, I've never had that. And not because my mother didn't want to validate me. It was just so much happening in the family.
Right.
And she had post-traumatic stress disorder and she was barely coping. But I've never heard my father ever tell me, or my brother or my sister, that he was proud of us. I've never heard those words from him. And I think that, look, this is not a pity party for me. I've spent many years in psychoanalysis working through all of that stuff. But I'm just saying it's an incredibly validating thing, and I make sure that I do it with my own children all the time.
Yes.
Because it lets them know that they are amazing. It lets them know that you value them. Do you know what I mean? It's a validation.
Yes. So, and I, you know, I'm gonna give my my mom some credit too, because in the Jamaican culture, the women aren't even like that. You know what I mean? So the women are not like babying. They show their love in other ways. Like they show their love and like they'll cook for you, they'll take care of you. They'll wash your clothes, they'll make sure that you have some clean clothes on. But they're not gonna tell you, "Oh, I love you so much." It's not the culture. So, but even my mom as well, she's more along now where she'll tell me she loves me, and then I tell Kyra all the time, like, at my big age of 31, it still feels good. Like you said, like it still feels good to hear it. So
because
I'm like,
they will always see you as their child. When I tell, you know, my children, "I love you, I'm so proud of you," the twinkle in their eye. You can see the elation and the validation for them. They're not just words. They have an energy and they have an impact. And they're incredibly important as a parent. I take that very seriously. So you feel that Jamaican culture, it's interesting that you say that, because in my Egyptian culture, as patriarchal as it is very affectionate. A mother will show affection to both her children. Like she will my mum rubbed our backs till the day she died, right? And we were 19, you know, and I've carried that on with my own children. You know, they'll never shy away from asking affection from me. But being biracial, you know, my children are also African American. I feel like that there's a difference in the culture that way. You know, and I understand why it had to be that way. The struggle that African Americans faced, I totally understand that. But it can be really difficult to like when my children's father and I started dating, he wasn't used to seeing affection in that way.
Yes.
So it had to be learned, and something that I taught him.
Yeah.
And then he extended it to our children as well. So
Yes.
we can always, there's no point in sitting and saying the past was bad and it was history. We can learn from it and make strides to change it.
Yeah, that's one thing that I appreciate about like this journey that I'm on now, where I'm like traveling and seeing different countries and different cultures and stuff like that, is because I like to take things that I see that works or that I like from different cultures.
Right.
So I went to Argentina, like I said, my first season, and the men in Argentina are so they're so passionate, and they're so, or what's the word I'm looking for? I just had a brain
emotional
lapse.
Or you affectionate?
Affectionate, sorry.
Right.
Yes, they're so affectionate with their children, especially their boys.
Yes.
Whereas like usually for me, I look at the father-son relationship as like, it's not really handsy, it's not really like they don't really, there's no affection. But when I went to Argentina and I saw how these men treat their sons, they still kiss their sons. When their son is like 5-6 years old, they're kissing their son. They're mi amor, everything. And I'm like, oh, I like that. So I'm traveling to different places and I'm taking little things here. Okay, I like this.
Oh, that's
I like that. So in our future, I'll bring those things to my kids that maybe I didn't necessarily see.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I mean, that's what we do, right? We become adults. We take bits from what our parents did well, and we imbue that into our own children, and we do things differently as well. I think that that's really, really important. I mean, that's one thing I loved about my mum, is that she would show affection equally to both my brother and I. And I think that's one of the reasons why he struggled tremendously after her death, because he saw himself as the apple of her eye, right? He thought he was a favorite. But I always say to him, you thought you were the favorite, but we were both, we're twins, right? So we were both favorites. But I think that, as parents, we can make those informed decisions to change culture in a way, because acknowledging a child's vulnerabilities gives them permission to then freely express those vulnerabilities. You're indirectly giving them permission to do so, right? And allowing a space for them, a safe space where they can talk about, I'm sad, or I'm not feeling good, or I'm anxious. Or I connected with a therapist recently who was talking to me about his type of therapy. And he says he sees men specifically, but what he does is he takes them to a golf course and they can have that conversation while they're playing golf, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah.
It's kind of like having a conversation, with my son when we're sitting in the car. He doesn't realize it's deep and intimate, because we're in the car,
right?
And you're kind of destigmatizing it that way. But I think, the more we talk about our vulnerability as human beings, regardless of whether you're a man or a woman, or fluid or transgender or whatever you identify with, we are all human. And we all have vulnerabilities, and those vulnerabilities are our strengths. It's a strength to be able to show those. It's a strength to be able to acknowledge that I'm sad and my sadness is making me cry. My friend just died.
Right.
You have a reason to be sad.
Right.
Yeah. I'm still like working on that, right? That part right there, because I agree. And like I said, like, once every decade or something I may cry, but being that vulnerable enough to like have people share, and you can like kind of get it off your chest in a different way is like where I'm working on, as far as like the crying part. Right. I can't see myself crying in front of people,
right?
What I mean? But that's just the old way that I'm thinking, and I'm sure like
well, that goes to gendered norms. One of the things that I think is very important as a mother and as a professional is to acknowledge a sensitivity in a man. The word sensitive for a man is like the Antichrist, and it's laden with problems for people.
Yeah.
But it's actually a strength. Sensitivity means you have innately empathy. You're empathetic. You can feel other people's pain. Sensitivity means that you are generally very kind, compassionate person.
Yeah.
Sensitivity means that you can, be in a room and decipher energy shifts before anything.
Right.
It's such a really important attribute to have.
Yeah.
On the flip side of it, it can also be a challenge because sensitivity can mean that it can sap you of your energy. People can confuse your sensitivity with being silly or stupid, right? Your kindness with stupidity. So it's a strength. It's a strength for people, and especially for men,
right.
To show that empathy, to show that sensitivity. What did it mean to you when your coach came in the locker room and hugged you?
Yeah.
You're probably shocked that he did that.
I was shocked.
Well, that's his empathy and sensitivity.
Right.
He saw it in you.
Right.
But he let you see that in him.
Yes.
And that's a strength.
Yeah.
Right? He
And
could
I
have
did
come out
appreciate that.
and he could have eviscerated you with one word, playing this macho character, but that wasn't him.
Yeah.
He gave you the space to be able to come to him in doing that himself, which is, I think, incredibly, incredibly fantastic and wonderful for him and you.
Yes.
But so I want to talk about the influence of pop culture on mental health for men. But we're going to take a quick break and get some dessert. I've got a nice dessert for you and a tea or coffee.
Nice.
Don't go anywhere. This is a wonderful show with professional athlete Duane Morgan, and we're chatting about men and men's mental health. I'm Marie-Therese Bolden. Catch you in a moment. Bye for now.